his chest pressed against my back, his breath warm and uneven against the base of my neck. And in that moment of horrifying, exquisite stillness, I knew I wouldn't stop him. I knew I would let this happen. Welcome back to Hidden Love Stories, the place where we explore the truths we hide, even from ourselves. The story you're about to hear is a confession, a journey into a moment that changed everything for a woman who thought her life was already over. It's about a line that was crossed in the most unexpected of places, with the most forbidden of people. If you've ever felt a pull towards something you knew was wrong but felt so right, then I need you to listen closely. And if this story resonates with you, press the number 1 in the comments to let me know I'm not alone in sharing these hidden truths. He moved from behind, slow and drawn out, like he was trying to feel everything at once, and I didn't stop him. I welcomed it. My palms, slick with a sudden nervous sweat, braced against the cool, unforgiving edge of the marble countertop. My body was slightly bent, a posture of surrender I hadn't intended, but now couldn't escape. His chest, broad and solid, pressed flush against my back, a wave of heat that seemed to seep straight through my thin tank top and into my bones. His breath faltered, warm and uneven against the sensitive skin at the base of my neck, each exhale a ghost of a touch that sent a shiver racing down my spine. One of his hands, calloused and strong, gripped my hip, not with force, but with a possessive certainty that made my breath catch. The other slid with agonizing slowness along my side, his fingers trembling ever so slightly, as if he didn't trust himself to hold me, as if he feared I might shatter or flee. I let my head fall forward, my hair curtaining my face, and closed my eyes as the full weight of him, his presence, his intent pushed into me. His body stilled for just a heartbeat, long enough to whisper something incoherent and desperate against my skin, something I didn't catch with my ears, but felt with my entire being. And then he rocked forward again, slow, deliberate, a rhythm that was a question and an answer all at once. I felt him shake. It wasn't from nerves, not anymore. It was the tremor of a man holding back an avalanche of want. I arched slightly, an involuntary response to the shift of pressure, a silent plea for more. A soft, broken sound escaped my lips, a sound I didn't mean to make, and I felt his hand tighten around my side in response, his anchor in the storm we were creating. The rhythm was unsteady, a clumsy, desperate dance. Too much, then not enough. It was a kind of intimacy that had nothing to do with skill or technique. It was about pure, unadulterated surrender. My skin burned everywhere he touched, and strangely, it burned even more intensely everywhere he didn't. I could feel how hard he was trying to stay quiet, how close he was to breaking, and still I greeted him, with my body, with every word I didn't say. He choked out, his voice thick with a mixture of desire and self-loathing. I shouldn't. I nodded against the countertop, the cool marble a stark contrast to the fire spreading through me. I know, but the words were hollow. I didn't ask him to stop. I didn't want him to stop. His body pressed deeper, a final, definitive act. I gasped, not from pain, but from the sheer, crushing weight of what we were doing. It was the total, horrifying knowledge that this was a moment we could never take back, a memory that would be seared into us forever. And I didn't want to. I never, in a million lonely nights, imagined I'd cross this line. Not like this, not with him, not in a kitchen that wasn't mine, bent over a marble counter that still smelled faintly of disinfectant and the Sunday roast my best friend, Hannah, had made before she left. But here I was, Jessica, 39 years old. Divorced for 3 of them, no kids. There was no one waiting for me at home, no one to wonder where I was or why I was late. There was just a stretch of empty days that felt like background noise, like the relentless static that fills your head when you're trying too hard to pretend you're fine. I was staying at Hannah's house for the week while she was in Barcelona for a work conference. She'd asked me to check in on things, water the plants, grab the mail, feed her perpetually unimpressed cat, Zeus. I said yes immediately, not just because she was my rock, my sister in everything but blood, but because I had nothing better to do. Because I loved her kitchen, the heart of her home, always filled with light and the phantom smells of happy family meals. Because her house was full of life even when she wasn't in it, a stark contrast to my own silent, sterile apartment. What she didn't mention in her hurried pre-flight checklist was that her younger brother, Ryan, would be dropping by. He's supposed to be there just once to pick up some old storage boxes from the garage, she'd said dismissively. He's harmless. That one visit turned into 2. Then he stayed for dinner, a casual affair of leftover pizza we ate standing in the kitchen. Then that dinner turned into watching a movie on the couch, the space between us shrinking with every passing minute. Then tonight happened. He was 10 years younger than me, 29, tall, with shoulders that had broadened since I'd last paid him any real attention. His hands were always a little calloused, the hands of a man who worked with them, who built things. He was a contractor, a fixer of broken things, and the irony was not lost on me. He used to be the scrawny, awkward kid who followed Hannah and me around during summer barbecues, a shadow with scraped knees, begging us to watch him do cannonballs into the pool. Now, he was a man I couldn't look at for too long without feeling a dangerous, unfamiliar heat curl somewhere deep inside me, a place I thought had gone cold long ago. He'd come by tonight to grab one last thing. I'd been cleaning out the fridge, lost in the mundane task, wearing a worn-out gray tank top and a pair of soft cotton shorts that were probably too short but were comfortable. He found a bottle of wine on the counter, one Hannah had left, and asked if I wanted to split it. I said yes. It started so simply, teasing me, poking fun at the way he still cracked his knuckles when he was nervous, a habit he'd had since he was 12. Him pointing out that I still stirred my drink in slow, deliberate circles. Like you're waiting for something that never shows up, he'd observed, with an insight that caught me off guard. The air grew thick with unspoken things. And then it happened with a startling, deafening quiet. I reached for the bottle to pour another glass. He stepped behind me to get to the corkscrew. And I didn't move. I stood perfectly still, my heart hammering against my ribs. I didn't move when his hand brushed my waist, a touch that felt both accidental and deeply intentional. I didn't move when his chest hovered so close behind me that I could feel the heat coming off him in waves. He didn't ask for permission. He just leaned in. And I didn't say no. What would you do if your best friend's younger brother, the boy you once knew, touched you like that? If he reached for you, not as a kid, not as family, but as a man, and you felt every ounce of his wanting in the sudden weakness of your knees, would you stop him? Or would you hold the edge of the counter and brace yourself for something that felt both like salvation and utter ruin? Because I didn't stop him. I let it happen, and now his breath was on my skin, and his hands were under my shirt, exploring, claiming. And every inch of me felt like it had been lit from the inside out. I shouldn't be here, he murmured again, his voice tight and strained against my ear. I managed to look over my shoulder, my eyes meeting his in the dim reflection of the glass on the cabinet door. They were dark, filled with a storm of conflict. "Then go," I challenged, my own voice a breathy whisper. He didn't move. His hand slid lower, over the curve of my hip, and his body followed, and I let him in completely. The pressure, the nearness, the searing heat of him, it was too much, and not enough, all at once. Every slow, hesitant thrust made me ache for something I couldn't name. Every low groan into my neck made me want to turn around, to grab his face in my hands and say it out loud. I've never felt this alive. When it ended, when the frantic energy finally subsided, he stayed close, his chest heaving against my back, his breathing ragged and loud in the quiet kitchen. His arms, which had been gripping me with such intensity, slipped gently around my waist, and he held me. We just stood there in the aftermath, enveloped in a profound silence, both of us knowing what we'd done. Both of us not ready to let go. If you're still with me now, still following this confession, then you understand why I'm telling it, because this story doesn't end in that kitchen. That was just the beginning. It gets messier, riskier, and more real. Please press the number 1 in the comments if you've ever been in a situation where your heart and your head were at war. Your story is safe here. The morning after was a masterpiece of denial. I sat at Hannah's polished oak kitchen table, pretending to scroll through meaningless social media feeds on my phone while he made coffee like it was any other day. Like his hands hadn't been all over my body just hours earlier. Like his breath hadn't caught in my ear while I held onto that cold marble counter and let him in deeper than I'd ever planned to let anyone in again. The house was quiet. Too quiet. It was the kind of suffocating silence that swells between two people who have just detonated a bomb and are now sitting in the wreckage, pretending not to see the debris. He set a mug in front of me without a word. The clink of ceramic on wood was deafening. "Thanks," I mumbled, my eyes still fixed on the glowing screen. He sat across from me, the chair scraping against the floor, and exhaled slowly. "You okay?" I nodded, a lie so blatant it felt like it should have been visible in the air between us. I wasn't okay. I was the furthest thing from okay. Because the truth was, I felt everything, every inch of what we did. It wasn't just the physical memory, the dull ache in my muscles. It was an emotional tidal wave. The shame, hot and sharp, warring with a hunger that shocked me, the way my skin still tingled where his fingers had curled under the hem of my shirt. He stirred his coffee once, twice, 3 times, then set the spoon down with a clatter, as if he couldn't think of what to do or say next. I was the one who finally broke the silence, my voice sounding foreign and brittle. "We need to pretend last night didn't happen." He didn't answer right away. He just stared into his black coffee. When he finally did speak, it wasn't with the easy agreement I had hoped for. "I don't think I can." I finally looked up from my phone. He was staring straight at me, his jaw tight, his hands clenched together on the table, as if he were trying to physically hold in something enormous. I knew what he meant because I couldn't either. I never meant to want him, not Ryan. Not the little brother of my closest friend, the woman who held my hand through my divorce, who brought me soup when I had the flu, who knew every one of my pathetic secrets, or so I thought. He was the boy I used to help babysit, the one who used to call me Miss Jess and sneak sips of our cocktails from the glasses we'd leave unattended at parties. But he wasn't a boy anymore. He was a man who looked at me like he saw something everyone else, including myself, had forgotten was there. Who touched me like I still mattered. And that scared the hell out of me because I hadn't felt that in years. My ex-husband, Mark, and I had simply unraveled. There was no big drama, no explosive affair, no single moment of betrayal. It was a slow, quiet death by 1,000 paper cuts. Years of not being truly seen. Of eating dinner in silence, the television filling the void. Of feeling like a ghost in my own house, a body in a home instead of a woman in a life. When the divorce was finalized, I told myself and everyone else that I would focus on myself, rebuild, reclaim something, but the months blurred into a monotonous gray landscape. Friends, busy with their own growing families, stopped calling as often. Their lives were filled with kids, soccer schedules, PTA meetings, and responsibilities. Mine was filled with leftovers for one in the fridge and a king-sized bed that never, ever felt warm enough. So when Hannah asked if I'd watch her place for a week, I said yes before she could even finish the sentence. I told myself it was to help her out. But the truth was, I wanted an escape. Out of my apartment, out of my routine, out of the lonely, invisible version of me I had become. The man who walked into that kitchen last week wasn't the kid I remembered from their mother's funeral 2 years prior. The grief had shattered them both in different ways. Hannah had shut down, becoming fiercely pragmatic. Ryan had just disappeared for a while. The boy was gone, and in his place was a man with stubble shadowing a strong jaw, broader shoulders, and eyes that looked like they'd seen things. And the way he hugged me hello, just a little too long, just a little too tight, made something unfamiliar catch low in my stomach. Now, sitting across from him in this sun-drenched kitchen, trying to pretend like I hadn't just let him shatter my carefully constructed world, I realized something terrifying. I didn't feel regret. I felt seen, I felt craved, I felt touched in a way that went far beyond skin. And that scared me more than anything, because if I couldn't regret it, how was I ever going to stop? After that morning, we didn't touch again. Not for 4 agonizing days, but the space between us buzzed like a live wire. He kept finding excuses to stay later each time he dropped by the house. First, he was organizing the attic, then sorting through old tools in the garage. Then, suddenly, the backyard hedge needed trimming. I knew it was a pretense. He knew I knew, but neither of us said a word. The tension didn't fade, it sharpened, honing itself into a blade that we were both dancing around. One afternoon, I was wiping down the kitchen table when he walked in from the backyard, his t-shirt clinging to his chest, sweat darkening the collar. He grabbed a bottle of water from the fridge, leaned back against the counter, and just watched me without speaking. I kept my eyes on the circular motions of the cloth in my hand. "You always clean when you're nervous," he said, his voice a low rumble. "I'm not nervous," I replied, too fast. He smirked, a flash of knowing that made my stomach flip. Right. The air between us thickened, becoming heavy and charged. He didn't move. I didn't either. Then, a loud crash from outside broke the spell. The neighbor's trash can toppled by the wind. I jumped, and he let out a soft laugh as if the tension had snapped just enough for him to breathe again. He left soon after, but that night I found his sweatshirt, a gray university hoodie, draped over the back of a dining chair. It smelled like him, clean detergent, fresh grass, and a faint masculine trace of cologne. I didn't return it. I folded it and put it in my suitcase. The next evening, he didn't come. I told myself I was glad, that it gave me room to think, to recalibrate, but I kept glancing at the driveway every time a car passed, my heart doing a hopeful little leap followed by a sharp pang of disappointment. I was acting like a teenager. When he showed up the next day, I tried to be indifferent. I was baking cookies, something I hadn't done in years. There was flour on my cheek, music playing low from a Bluetooth speaker. I thought I looked domestic and ridiculous, too much so for anything to happen. He didn't think so. "You always bake when you're trying to avoid things?" he asked, stepping into the kitchen, his presence immediately filling the space. "No," I said, my voice steadier this time. "That's what the wine is for." He smiled, and it was the kind of genuine, heart-stopping smile that made me feel like a woman again, not just a 39-year-old divorcee hiding in her friend's house. He stepped behind me, far too close. I froze, my hand hovering over the cookie sheet. He didn't touch me. He just leaned over, his arm brushing my back, reached for the cinnamon on the shelf above my head, and said, his voice a low, intimate murmur, "You missed a spot." I turned my head to look at him. "Where?" His eyes dropped from mine to my cheek, then to my mouth. He reached up, his movements achingly slow, and brushed the corner of my mouth with the pad of his thumb, wiping away the stray flour. His touch was electric. I stopped breathing. The silence between us was a physical thing, a weight pressing down on us. He pulled his hand back as if burned. "I should," he started, then shook his head, looking utterly lost. "I don't know what I'm doing anymore." "Me neither," I confessed, and the words came out too soft, too honest. He didn't kiss me. Not then, but he lingered, and that night he texted me for the first time. "Do you ever think about it?" That night, I stared at the screen for a full 5 minutes before my fingers typed a reply. "I can't stop." His response was immediate. "Then tell me when I can see you again." I didn't answer, but the next day, I wore the soft blue tank top he'd once looked at for a second too long. We were playing a dangerous game, pretending we weren't watching each other in reflections, pretending our hands didn't accidentally meet more often than they should, pretending he didn't brush against my lower back when he passed behind me in the narrow hallway, and that I didn't lean into it just slightly, pretending we weren't two people barreling toward a cliff, hand in hand. The storm came fast that Friday night. It was the last night I was supposed to be there. He hadn't planned to stay. I hadn't planned to let him. But the thunder came, thick and rattling, the kind that shook the windows and made the air feel close and electric. We were in the living room, both pretending to be invested in a nature documentary neither of us could recall the name of. The lights flickered once, twice, then cut out completely, plunging us into darkness. "I'll find a flashlight," I said, my voice sounding shaky in the sudden dark. I got up, and I could hear him following me. I opened the hallway closet and reached up blindly, my fingers fumbling around the cluttered top shelf. The cool metal of a flashlight fell into my hand just as his body pressed close behind me. Neither of us spoke. His breath was on my neck, slow and unsteady. I turned around to pass him the light, but the look on his face, illuminated for a split second by a flash of lightning, made my hand freeze in midair. It wasn't hunger this time. It was something else, something raw and desperate and sad. His hand came up, hesitant, as if he wasn't sure I'd let him. His fingers hovered at my jawline before finally landing, his thumb brushing the corner of my mouth. "I can't keep pretending this didn't happen, Jess," he whispered, his voice cracking. I closed my eyes, letting the words wash over me. "I know." He leaned in, and this kiss was different from the frantic energy in the kitchen. It was slower, deeper, almost sorrowful, as if he already knew what it would cost us. I didn't pull back. I kissed him back with everything I had, a desperate, hopeless kiss. The flashlight hit the floor, forgotten. We stumbled, still kissing, toward the nearest room, which happened to be the guest room I was using. His hands found my waist, my hips, lifting the hem of my shirt. My fingers gripped his back, tracing the hard lines of muscle under his skin. When he laid me down on the bed, he didn't rush. He hovered over me, his forehead resting against mine, just breathing me in. "You're shaking," I whispered into the space between our lips. "I don't want to hurt you," he breathed back. "You won't." But we both knew we'd already done irreparable damage. He moved with a reverence that undid me. Each kiss, each touch was slow, deliberate, worshipful. His hand moved to my thigh, just resting there, his palm a hot brand against my skin. There was a moment just before he entered me when we both paused, our eyes locked in the dim light. I saw the question in his gaze, and I answered by parting my legs, a silent invitation. He eased into me slowly, and I gasped, not from pain, but from the overwhelming feeling of being so completely filled, so carefully held. His body trembled as he moved, every inch of contact stealing the air from my lungs. I clung to him, not just out of pleasure, but because something about this felt like breaking and belonging all at once. When it was over, he didn't roll away. He stayed inside me, his chest pressed to mine, his fingers tracing soft, absent-minded circles along my ribs. Our breaths tangled in the dark. I didn't cry, but I felt the ache of it rising in my throat, that impossible, suffocating cocktail of guilt and longing for a version of this where no one got hurt. "I don't want this to ruin everything," he said, his voice barely audible. I ran my hand through his damp hair. "It already has," I whispered. He nodded against my shoulder. "I still don't regret it." And the most terrifying part was neither did I. But regret wasn't the problem. Reality was. And reality was scheduled to come home on a flight from Barcelona in less than 48 hours. Reality's name was Hannah, my best friend, his sister. And she was about to walk into a house that was no longer just hers, but a crime scene of our shared betrayal. Have you ever had to face the consequences of a choice you knew was wrong, but that you'd make all over again? If you have, press 1 in the comments. Let's see how many of us have lived in that gray area. The next morning I woke before him. He was lying on his side, one arm thrown protectively across my stomach, his face peaceful in the early light. He looked like he belonged there, and that's what scared me most. I slipped out from under his arm, my body aching in ways that were both pleasurable and painful. I stood in the kitchen, our kitchen, and pressed my hands flat against the cold marble counter, trying to breathe. That afternoon, needing to escape the tension, I went to the grocery store. And there, in the dairy aisle, I ran into an old coworker. She was bubbly and full of questions. How was I? Was I seeing anyone? What was I doing in this neighborhood? I heard myself lie, weaving a simple, clean story about house-sitting for a friend. Not a whisper about the man waiting for me in that house, in my bed, with my scent still on his skin. I walked out with shaking hands and a profound sense of dread. I was living a double life, and the walls were closing in. When I got back to the house, he was gone. No note, no message, just a suffocating silence. That night, I lay in that bed alone, staring at the ceiling, wondering if he finally felt the regret that I couldn't. At 2:14 a.m., my phone lit up. I had to get out of there. I wanted to stay, but I'm losing my mind. I typed back, "You don't owe me an explanation." His reply was instant. "That's not true. You deserve one. But I don't know how to give it without making it worse." The next day, Hannah's last day away, was a silent hell. Then, in the afternoon, my phone rang. It was him. "I think I left my jacket," he said. It was a flimsy excuse, but I told him to come. When he walked in, the air crackled. We stood in the entryway, feet apart, the space between us a chasm. "Please don't ask me to stay," he said, his voice strained. "I wasn't going to." He let out a breath of what sounded like relief. Then, much quieter, "Because I would." We stood there, suspended in that impossible moment, until he finally cracked. He stepped forward and kissed me, hard and desperate, a kiss that tasted like goodbye. I kissed him back with the same frantic energy. When we pulled apart, his forehead pressed to mine, both of us breathless. He whispered the words I had been dreading. "We can't keep doing this. Someone's going to find out." It turned out someone already had. But it wasn't Hannah. I didn't even know he was back in the country. Jake, Hannah's husband, wasn't supposed to be home for another 2 days from his own business trip. But I walked in from the backyard, my lips still tingling from Ryan's goodbye kiss, to find Jake sitting at the kitchen island, a beer in his hand and a look on his face that turned my blood to ice. He nodded towards the hallway, where Ryan had apparently just exited. "Saw him leaving," Jake said, his voice eerily calm. "Didn't know he was staying over." My mouth went dry. "He wasn't. He just..." The lie died on my lips. Jake looked at me, his eyes narrowed, not with anger, but with something worse, a quiet, knowing disappointment. "Jess," he said softly, "I always saw the way he looked at you. Even years ago." He shook his head. "Don't insult my intelligence. Does Hannah know?" I shook my head, my whole body trembling. "I won't tell her," he said, "and it wasn't a kindness, it was a burden. That's not my secret to tell." "It's yours." He took a long drink of his beer, his gaze holding mine. "But you need to end it, before she walks in that door tomorrow and finds out for herself." When Ryan came back later that evening, thinking Jake was still gone, he walked in carrying takeout, smiling, until he saw my face. "What is it?" "Jake's back. He knows Ryan." Ryan went pale. He sank into the nearest chair and ran both hands through his hair. "What did you tell him?" "I didn't have to tell him anything. He saw. He knew." Ryan stared at the floor, the full weight of our recklessness crashing down on him. "He's not going to tell her," I said, kneeling in front of him. But Ryan looked at me, his eyes full of a terrible finality. "It doesn't matter, Jess." He stood up, backing away from me. "It's too close. It's too much. I can't keep putting you in the middle of this." "You're not putting me anywhere," I insisted, my voice rising. "I'm the one who..." "No," he cut me off, his voice firm. "I'm the one who should have known better. I'm 10 years younger. I'm her brother." I should have walked away. He turned his back to me, and I felt a crack split down the middle of my chest. "So what?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "You're done?" His back was still to me, a wall I couldn't get past. "I have to be," he said. The words weren't cruel, but they were absolute. "Hannah's coming home tomorrow. This has to be over for good." And just like that, it was. He walked out the door, and the silence he left behind was louder than any storm. I was alone again, in a house that was no longer a sanctuary, but a monument to a secret that would now sit between me and my best friend forever, whether she knew it or not. The affair was over, but I was left with a far more complicated reality. I had traded my loneliness for a secret that would isolate me even more, and I had tasted a feeling of being alive that I knew I would now spend a lifetime craving again. What do you do when the thing that breaks you is also the only thing that made you feel whole? Thank you for being here with Hidden Love Stories. This is a reminder that our most complicated stories are the ones that make us who we are. Press 1 in the comments if you believe that sometimes the wrongest choices teach us the most important lessons. Your presence here means the world